Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today I want to talk about the Lunar Chronicles series. I have literally just finished winter and I have to talk about it. So I may be going into spoilers throughout this talk, so if you haven't read any of them, I will try and separate it into a spoilery and a non-spoilery section for you guys so you know where to avoid. The Lunar Chronicles series is a set of 4 books which are called Cinder, Scarlet, Cress and Winter. It's a fairy tale retelling and it is written by Marissa Meyer. So as you can probably guess, Cinder is based off Cinderella, Scarlet is the Little Red Riding Hood, Cress is Rapunzel and Winter is Snow White. They're not separate stories, so they're all part of one big story. So it's all about them overcoming their certain obstacles, like Cinderella going to the ball or Rapunzel being trapped in a satellite instead of a tower, Scarlet trying to search for her grandmère or grandmother, and Winter's a bit different in the sense of Snow White. She's very whimsical, she's very like floating on air, her voice is very sweet and she loves animals and things like that. But apart from that and a few scenes where it's very obviously heavily influenced by Snow White, she's not... It's hard to explain without going into the premise of the whole, without actually like giving you spoilers, but it's very much... It's not what you expect. One way I would describe the series is the tagline that I always see when I'm reading the audio or listening to the audiobooks, and it says it's not the fairy tale you remember, but it's one you're not likely to forget. And it's so true, so true. I love it, it's brilliant. It's just, everything about it was just amazing. I think I gave 3 out of the 4 books 5 out of 5 stars. The only book I didn't give 5 stars was Scarlet because I found it dry in places. It also got very repetitive and it was getting a little bit frustrating, but I pushed on through the frustrating bits and I found when it wasn't being repetitive, it was really enjoyable. I could really get into it. And also, so what happens is you're introduced to Cinder in the first book, then as you're introduced to Scarlet in the second one, you kind of go between Scarlet and Cinder, so you kind of get to see what Cinder's been doing while Scarlet's going through all of her stuff, and then it kind of just ebbs and flows from there. But it's just so brilliant. Unfortunately I don't have any physical copies of the books. My plan is when I can afford it to buy the box set for all 6. I think it's all 6 books. I suppose I should explain that. The series has 2 novellas attached to it, which is Fairest, which is the history of the Queen that you spend the entire season despising, and All the Stars Above, which is basically after Happily Ever After. I'm interested to see what happens in those because I've not seen them yet. I'm planning on reading them as part of my 24 in 48 hour read along, which by the time I upload this video should have been done, so I should know more about them. But for the intensive purposes of this video, I will just be talking about the 4 main. Okay, so now I'm going to be going into the spoilery section, so if you haven't read it, I'll see you guys later. For those of you who have, oh my god. Firstly, I have to talk about my favourite thing about the entire season, Thorn and Cress. Just OTP, seriously, I am in love. Absolutely in love with them. How innocent but strong Cress is, how charming. Thorn is just, he's just amazing. He's charming, he's a bit of, you know, he's a bit stuck up in some places, but it all comes from a place of love, and he's a genuinely lovely person once you get past his bravado, if you like. He's just, oh, and him and Cress, the way he protects her is just, I love it. I love Cinder and Kai. Cinder is probably my favourite character in the whole series, because just everything she's had to go through, and she just doesn't let it affect her, even when she finds out about who she really is and everything else. I just find that I I respect her so much for what she's going through, and I found myself not wanting to finish Winter. It meant that I wouldn't see any of the characters again, but especially I wouldn't see Scarlet again. I wouldn't see Cinder again, and it just broke my heart when I finished that. But I've still got All the Stars Above Me to read, so that should be at least something to get me back into it for a little while. Oh, I just love it. And then you've got Scarlet, and now Scarlet irritates me somewhat. I found I liked her with Winter in the last book, like her relationship, the way that she doesn't sugarcoat anything with Winter. It really seemed to help her with what she was going through and everything else. But in her book, Scarlet, she just irked me so much. She kept going on and on and on about her grandmère, and it just drove me nuts, because I understand that she misses her grandma and I understand she's a huge part of her life, but for that beginning of that book we didn't get to know anything else about her. Like, we didn't know, we got to briefly see some things about her in her job where she's delivering the vegetables and her goods and whatnot, but other than that we don't see any part of her apart from the fact that she's missing her grandmère, and she's getting increasingly frustrated with people who think her grandma's crazy or things like that, and it just drove me a bit nuts. And then when she met Wolf, and you've got that whole romance side of it in Scarlet, I found I enjoyed that half of the book more, like, because you got to see her in all her honesty, and I like that. But the Scarlet and Wolf pairing is probably my least favourite of the two, despite the fact that I cried when they finally reunited in Winter. My heart just kind of leapt. But I still really love them, don't get me wrong, it's just I almost couldn't take them seriously because of how much she spent so much time wanting to find her grandmère, and then all of a sudden she's just thrown into this world and she just accepts it. It was almost unreal how long she spent grieving her or looking for her grandmère in her book, and then by the time Winter gets back there's only a couple of mentions of it, and I don't know whether that was because there was so much going on that there wasn't enough time to properly speak about it, or maybe she was so involved in the storyline that she didn't have time to properly grieve about her grandma or grandmère. But I just found it almost dishonest to who Scarlet was, because her biggest problem seemed to be Wolf the entire time, and I know her grandmère was mentioned from time to time, but it just didn't feel, at least for me, having lost someone close to me, I know that doesn't go away. Every time you do or say or think about something, that person's in the back of your mind, and it just felt very dishonest to who Scarlet was written to be. I still absolutely love Scarlet. She's probably my least favourite princess out of the whole series, but she was still a lovable character. I was laughing out loud at some of her sarcasm and her wit. Cinder and Kai, I adored. I found Kai the most enjoyable when he was in his office trying to keep Levana from overthrowing the Commonwealth. The wit in his voice was just, and the way he kind of could take everything in stride, and despite the fact that he was such a new emperor, he did such a good job of everything, and I found I really enjoyed him then. But Cinder and Kai together, just loved. It was very honest to who their characters were. Although the relationship was very kind of hit and miss, you could see they still cared about each other, despite the fact that when he last saw her she had betrayed him or she had lied to him, and I loved the whole progression of that. Now Winter and Jason, I loved how protective they were. I loved their banter between each other. I loved the way Winter was described, the way she was very much crazy but not, if that makes sense. Like, you could see her struggling with the day-to-day of the fact that she wasn't using her gifts, and the fact that she was increasingly becoming crazier, and the fact that you just got to sort of see the raw emotion of Jason and I thought that was very honest to the fact that you can still love someone despite mental illnesses and stuff like that, and I very much enjoyed that. And I loved how the one thing I love about Marissa Meyer's writing is you can very distinctly tell who's talking. Come on in. you could very distinctly tell who's talking. There was no hesitation for me in, there was no kind of struggle as to who was talking, considering the fact you jump between different people's perspectives so much, especially in winter. It was very, very nice to see that all the voices were very unique, very honest to their characters. I think it helped that I listened to them on audiobook, because obviously the narrator gave them all slightly different tones of voices, but even then, even when the one line could be said by a numerous amount of characters, it was still obvious who each character was. Now, the one character I haven't mentioned, who is probably one of my favourite characters, or second, yeah, she's my second favourite character next to Cinder, and that is Aiko. I love her. Her sass is just amazing, and her with Kenny in the last book towards the end, it's just so funny. And I love the fact that Aiko is always loyal to Cinder. I like the fact that we found out that she'd been instrumental in the story, despite the fact that she was best friends with Cinder and that was her role. But then later, towards the end of winter, you find out that she's actually got the information to do with the implant inside Cinder's head, which up until she had the information about the implant inside Cinder's head and what had stopped her using her lunar gift until the ball. So it all kind of rounded very, very nicely. I didn't want it to end because it was just so good. I have spent every spare moment in this month, because I started the season around Christmas, and it is now so today is the 25th of January, and I have read all 4 books, and by the end of the month I hope to have all 6 books finished. So I am addicted, I won't lie. It's just it just captured me from the first sentence, and I love it. I love the way that Marissa Meyer can make your heart leap with joy. It can also make you want, you grab the sides of your chair just anticipating what's coming next. I loved the romances, each very unique but all very honest to who the characters were supposed to be. And I think that's what I liked about it as well, is the fact that they are fairy tales. Like, you know what to expect, but you don't, like, because you know that, at least in true fairy tales, there's always a happily ever after. You know the stories of Cinderella, Red Riding Hood, Rapunzel and Snow White. You know who their supposed love interests are. You know, like, what the point of their story is, the lessons behind them. But what I liked about Marissa Meyer's writing, not only does she manage to blend all of these characters into one world, which was just fantastic, but she managed to make each princess her own hero. There was no sugarcoating anything. Like, you got to see all of their flaws, you got to see their nervousness and their unsureness about their futures and what they were going through and what they had to do to stop Lavanna. You could see everything that they were going through very honestly to who their characters were and who their original base characters were from the original fairy tales. And I just loved how it was all kind of intricately woven together. I loved the relationship between certain characters, Aiko and Thorn. I loved them. I loved Worf with Cinder, the fact that he didn't sugarcoat anything for her. Again, I love Winter and Scarlet. They were like the best of friends. You can just tell they're best friends, and it was just all wonderful, absolutely wonderful. I could go on and on and on about this season because I love it so much. I will be buying physical copies of the season when I can afford it. Unfortunately, at the moment, I can't. Let me know if you guys have read it. If so, what you thought in the comments below. Let me know what your ratings for each book was, whether you agree with my opinions about some of the characters, whether you don't. And I will, as usual, link my social media in the box below. If anyone knows how to make them appear on the video, please let me know, because I have been trying to do it and I just can't figure it out. I don't know whether I'm using the wrong editing software or whether there's a particular thing I've got to go on to make one for my accounts. But please, someone let me know if you know how, because I'd very much like to be able to add them onto the screen as well. Yeah, and thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.